in a few hours, the US is going to go to the polls, right? Yeah, yeah. And it's even making us tired. I was saying to people yesterday, how are you feeling? They say, tired. I say, why? And we've figured out that, it's quite a momentous time. And here we are talking about leadership, right? How weird is that when you've got two people in this very large country that nobody really trusts? And so it's a very important time to be talking about leadership. So there's lots going on in the world right now. We've looked at some of the trends even this morning, and probably yesterday you did too. Lots of trends about what tech is doing, what AI is doing, what is going to be the real future of work, what are we going to be asked to do, what won't we be doing. And this is all very exciting and galvanizing. And it has drawbacks. As we've seen some of these drawbacks, and Andrew was speaking very nicely about that this morning, and there are other drawbacks to this change that is coming upon us so rapidly. And some of these drawbacks have to do with people feeling more isolated than before, because tech is driving certain ways we work. So we are becoming more isolated, and this has to do with a lot of social issues as well. There's much, much more stress, as Andrew was saying, and a lot of it is just bad stress. And I'll talk about the difference between bad stress and good stress, and it's not just how much, but there are certain kinds of stress that we are geared neurobiologically and genetically to take, and certain kinds of stress that we are not. So there's all this stuff happening, and your job is going to be how you cope with it yourself, and also how you help others cope and even thrive. So whether you're a performance manager or an engagement manager or a team leader or a team member or a colleague or a friend or a family member, you're having an impact on people all the time. And how you interact with them is going to be really crucial as to how they manage this, I think, pivotal point in our history, and how KPMG collectively manages that in terms of KPMG. So luckily, as Susan was saying, right now we also are in the midst of this extraordinary pioneering work about what humans are all about. So for all these many, many years, we've been guessing largely about what human beings are about. And because of some of the tech and the new kinds of research, there's been this avalanche of information. And it's coming out now every day faster and faster about what human beings are really all about. Every week something extraordinarily pops up that we didn't know. But there's a lot that we do know, and that we can say hand on heart right now, that we know not only because of the brain science, but we've actually cracked the genetic code in the big picture. We understand the role that microbiota play in our moods and our performance and our actions. We're really getting to understand, and hands on heart, what I want to talk to you today is what we are learning from this and what it means for you. Because we now actually know what is our greatest fear, what is human beings' greatest fear. We actually know that. What do we long for? What are our genetics and our neurobiology trying to do? And it comes down to very, very simple things. What enables us to change? What stops change? What enables us to learn? What stops learning? What enables us to be at our best? What stops that? What context do we need in order for we as human beings to actually function and thrive? We now know this stuff to a very large degree. And that's what I'll be talking to you about today. And when it boils down, don't worry, there's a lot of complex research. But it boils down to some very, very simple things, and things that you can do to make a real impact on the people around you. And one of the things that I hope you'll leave with is the understanding that every interaction creates change in each person involved. And that change can be actually quite profound, every interaction. So you're influencing and impacting on people all the time. And it's a matter of how you make the most of that. Okay, with me so far? Yeah? Okay, good. What I'd like you to kind of keep in mind is three things that I'm going to ask you to focus on and come away with, what I would really like for you to come away with. One is that as a manager or somebody influencing, and this, by the way, applies to your clients as well. In order to influence somebody, in order to manage, in order to assist, in order to help, in order to have somebody be more collegial with you, you have to do one simple thing and everything flows from that. And that is, you got to get them committed to the relationship with you. And this is a new way of looking at things, but this is what all the research is telling us, and I'll be showing you why. You also have to focus on strengths. The more you go on about what somebody's done wrong and how they've done it wrong and so forth, the more they'll just do that same thing again. Also, when you focus on somebody's strengths, you actually galvanize them to do more of that good stuff. And that's one of the ways that you motivate and influence people. Very powerful. I'll be talking about that. Getting people committed to the relationship with you is not all about being nicey-nicey. It really isn't. It's being very clear about your needs and your expectations, finding out what they need of you, their expectations of you, and then coming to agreements, which is very hard-edged. A quality conversation is going to have a lot of nice stuff and good stuff and praise, hopefully. And it's also going to be about this mutual feedback. But you have to know how to get the other person to feel safe enough to hear it, even if they've asked for it. Okay, so these three things: communicate needs and boundaries, focus on strengths, get people committed, indeed, in terms of the brain, addicted, if you like, to the relationship with you. Okay, so let's look a little bit at what is human. If you crack open a human being, what you find is that at base we are relationship-forming creatures. That's what we're about. You know, we talk about this tech stuff and we talk about all these other huge changes that are happening within our society, but it doesn't change our core genetics. It doesn't change our core neurobiology. And when you look at the core neurobiology and the core neurogenetics, what do you find? You find that what we want is to surround ourselves with supportive relationships. And 80% of all of our genetics and our neurobiology is about that and that alone. 80%. And everything else just kind of keeps things going. But this is the motivator. This is what we long for, we hope for, and we fear when we feel that this might be threatened. Why is that? Any of you ever been on safari in Africa? Yeah? Yeah, okay, you know, right? So it was on those plains that our genetics, as we have them now, was developed. And any of you actually ever get out of those big Land Rovers that they take you around in and stand on the savannah? Yeah? What did it feel like? Liberating and free, absolutely. And one thing I felt when I got out of those Land Rovers was I suddenly realized how puny I am, right? Everything else has either sharper claws, longer teeth, or can run faster than me, right? You all know that, okay? So basically, I get out there, walk away from the Land Rovers, and everything is kind of looking at me like what? I don't know, maybe lunch. And this was where our ancestors developed, and we became human beings. So what did we have if we didn't have all those things? We had a group of people around us who could stand either shoulder to shoulder or encircle us with their spears or their stones, and that's what protected us, was our ability to collaborate. And so everything is geared for our survival by surrounding ourselves with supportive relationships, people having our back. That's what we're about. And if you keep that one very simple thing in mind, no matter who you're dealing with, this is what's going on for them, and this is what's going on for you. And we'll look a bit more into that later. Therefore, what is so important to us as human beings is the sense that we belong. And a lot of people are saying in a lot of workplaces, and KPMG is one of them, that many people are saying that as you go agile and as things change so rapidly, we are in danger of losing the traditional fabric of belonging. And many people are feeling isolated. 60% of Australians feel that they feel lonely at work. Wow, right? That's quite something. So this sense of belonging is one of the things that is endangered, and yet it's this sense of belonging that gives you the sense of safety for you to actually be able to perform at your best and for others to be able to do so too. So again, if you just keep in mind that part of your job is to create tribe as an influencer, friend, manager, that's one of the things that's going to make you successful. We've been talking so much about change, and the vast amounts of change that are coming. And yet the bad news is that human beings basically don't like change. For millions of years, we didn't change the way we do things. We didn't change the way we hunted, we gathered, we built shelter, temporary mostly. We didn't change all that. And now suddenly we are engulfed in change. And for many of you, it's going to be your job to be facilitating that change. You're going to be asking people to do things differently. And you're going to be asked to do things differently as you are, right? Yeah? And how are you going to do this if people innately fear change, if we actually resist change? One of the ways to help you is to understand what we fear about change. And what we most fear about change is that any change is going to somehow disrupt this web of relationships that we have. That's the fear. So when somebody is resisting change, unconsciously, they are saying to themselves, how is this going to make me more isolated? Or how could this make me feel more part of the tribe, more valued, and relationally safer? That's what's going on. A kind of an interesting thing is that change is, we are so wired for stasis that change goes through much of the same neural pathways as physical pain. And you can kind of see that on the slides there, on the PowerPoint. It shows you, that's the area that, there's a lot of overlap between the area of physical pain and the area of change. So this is what's happening, and that's why emotional, relational safety is such an important part of what needs to happen. Now, you all know that we make bad decisions under stress, right? As Susan was saying, under stress, when you have bad stress, too much stress, relational stress, which is always not a good piece of stress for a human being because we want to feel safe in our relationships. We can go out, we can hunt, we can gather, you can hunt with your clients, you can do enormous things, you can meet enormously stressful challenges if you feel you've got your tribe with you, if you feel people have your back, if you feel you're going to be valued for doing it. When you start losing that kind of stress is very, very negative. And what that does is that puts you into immediate fight, flight, or freeze. And you can't make good decisions in fight, flight, or freeze, right? Because it just closes down your options. So you and your people and your colleagues and your friends and so forth, you will not make decisions, good decisions under stress. And the antidote to stress is relational safety, one of the largest antidotes. There's a lot of physiology, yes, but we're relationship-forming creatures. And what will give you that sense of safety and calm down the amygdala and mitigate fight, flight, or freeze is that sense that people have your back. All behavior is mitigated by the reward system. And I'm going to be talking about praise in a few minutes. How do you trigger the reward system? It's as simple as that. There are very, very simple things that trigger somebody to do what you ask them to do, and there are some things that actually stop them from doing what you need them to do, and it all goes through the reward system. But if you can make people through the reward system feel valued, the neurochemistry that is triggered will actually galvanize them forward to do the things that you're asking them to do. Does that make sense? Yeah? Yeah? And we can literally watch this happen. You can watch the neurochemistry play. You can watch certain genes turning on or off when the reward system is triggered. And finally, as I say, every interaction affects both people's neurobiology and genetics, because some of our genes actually turn on and off, not all of them. I'm not going to start having brown eyes or the defined cheekbones that I would really love because of an interaction with any of you. But the behavioral and the mood genes, the genes that control those, actually can express themselves or turn off depending on the interaction. So that when people say that what the scientists now tell us is that every interaction affects both people, they're actually talking physiologically. It's a very specific interaction, and you can actually see it and measure it. So what goes on in our system is largely unconscious but very powerful. And just to demonstrate that for a moment, I'd like you to get up, and I want you to shake 3 people's hands. So if you would just get up and just shake 3 people's hands. I know you've been doing a lot of touchy-feely stuff, but this has a neurobiological and genetic background. 3 people's hands, right? Okay, excellent. Very, very good. Come back, sit down. Thank you for that. Okay, touchy-feely is over. Good, good. Sit down. And I'm going to make a point in a minute, but first I would like to ask you how many, we've got 4 brains, I'll tell you that. We've got 4 brains. A brain is just a nexus of nerves, right? Talking to each other, neurons talking to each other. Oh, she has such a lovely nod. My reward system is going, they're going like this. My reward system sparks. Thank you. So we've got 4 brains. One is up here, obviously, right? I'll give you that one. Where are the other 3? Yes! Excellent, in the gut. I must say, when I talked to a group of you, of your partners a few weeks ago, that was not the first place that came to mind. So you have so much more integrity and knowledge. This is fantastic. Yes, in the gut. When you say you have a gut feel about something, it's actually quite physically true. So where would be another brain? Heart. Yeah, that's excellent. And we only found out about that in the last year. Not only that, but here's the cool thing. The heart brain actually regulates the romantic issues. So Valentine's Day really does have something going for it. And so where's the 3rd brain? Not yet. I mean, we may discover it. We're still discovering this stuff, but the lungs are not yet, they haven't discovered that yet, if that's true. Skin. Who said skin? Brilliant. Brilliant. Yeah, we must have a couple of neurobiologists. Are you a neurobiologist? No? Skin. Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, the skin is actually a brain, and the neurons in the skin actually take in information and to some degree make decisions. What did you do when you shook hands? When you shook hands, you actually exchanged genetic information. How many of you have kids, young kids? I think you said most of you do, right? Yeah? I don't know, do people still talk about cooties? Yeah, they do. Okay, we're not talking about cooties or germs. We're talking about genetic information that goes through the derma, through the skin. And so you actually get information about the person that you shake hands with, and that information stays with you. So you may meet them a long time later, or even a little bit later, and if you've got that cognitive inattention thing, you may forget their name or even their face. But your system remembers them because you've got that genetic information. And this is one of this chance to touch or smell with pheromones, or even see each other is decreasing in our society. And it's so very, very powerful. Oops. I'd like you to just take a moment before I go on to the next piece of information and gear your thinking to how you might use some of this stuff. You with me? Yeah? Yeah? Okay, good. I would like you to write down 3 people whom you would like to influence. So if you're a performance manager, it's going to be your counselee. If you're an engagement manager, it may be some of the people in your team. If you are neither, you've got colleagues, you've got team members, people that you might like to influence. And remember, you influence people through every interaction, for better or for worse. So just write down 3 names of people that you all have paper. Is there some paper? Anybody not have paper or pen? Yeah, we're all set? Good. So write down 3 names, and then of those, I would like you to choose one person to focus on during this talk. Okay, done that? Yeah? Yeah? Good, excellent. I'm going to be coming back to this in a little bit. But I'd like to have you thinking about particularly that one person as I tell you what goes on in the brain in every conversation. You up for that? Would you like to know when you're talking to people what's actually going on? Yeah? And when they say yes, 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 and then they walk out of the room and do the opposite thing, what went wrong? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Okay. Here's, my team and I drew up a model of what is going on in the brain in every conversation. We didn't add the genetics and we didn't add the microbiota, but the numbers are pretty much the same. Let's just stick with the brain for the moment. In any interaction, the attention of the brain is in 3 areas, okay? And the first is, if you look at it as an iceberg model, you'll see that the first, that 1%, is the piece above the waterline. And it's very, very small. In fact, we've discovered now that it's even much, much smaller than 1%, but hey, that makes the math too complicated. So 1%, let's say 0.005 of what goes on in any conversation you can be conscious of. It is kind of visible to you fairly easily. Okay, underneath that, the 20% is what you need to look more clearly at. It's maybe more murky, just under the water. Underneath that, a whopping 79, 80%, you have to take a deep dive to really find out in any conversation. What this correlates to, the 1%, the 0.005%, is what you think you're talking about. Whatever you think you're talking about, the presenting issue, the topic, there are many ways to call it. What you think you're talking about, the brain doesn't care about at all. Now, this could be the project, it could be the deadline, it could be your salary, it could be your rating, it could be KPMG's rating. When you're talking about this topic, the brain just doesn't care. What it's saying is, what does this mean to me? Does that make sense? It could be, by the way, it could be unloading the dishwasher. How many of you have had sort of robust conversations about unloading the dishwasher? Yeah. It's never the dishwasher, is it? It's what does it say about, our roles in the family and so forth and so on. So underneath that, you've got that 20%, and that's the underlying issue. That's what does this mean to me? And we're missing one of the bullets that didn't translate into this as we put it on the computer here. But it's our fears, our hopes, and our beliefs and our assumptions. Our fears, our hopes, our beliefs, and our assumptions. And I'll be talking about that a bit more later, but one thing I would like to tell you is that of your assumptions, what percent do you think of the assumptions that you make are right? Just throw out a percentage. What if you're going to make an assumption, what percentage do you think of your assumptions are right? 50, 80, 50, 60, 20? We're going to get there eventually, aren't we? Okay, 30% of our assumptions are correct. 30% of our assumptions are right. 70% of all of our assumptions are wrong. This is stuff that MIT came out with. 70% of all our assumptions are wrong, right? Now, of course, that does mean that 30% are right. The problem is that you never know which is the 30%, right? So that means that you really have to keep checking your assumptions. This scares me even more. About other people, and this really applies to you in your roles, about other people, 90% of all of your assumptions are wrong in some way. And this becomes more strong, this wrongness of assumptions becomes stronger the longer that you have worked with them or lived with them. Isn't that wild? When you first meet somebody, you kind of ask, and you don't know them, so you're curious, and you ask. When you've lived with somebody or worked with somebody, you've got all this jargon in the way and all these assumptions, and they just pile up. And so you don't really know them at all, and you think you do. Underneath that sits that 79, 80% of what the relationship is all about. And that at every moment, we are people, we are creatures that are in the moment. And the in the moment stuff is saying, are you part of my support network? Are you a member of my tribe? And here's the good and bad news. Your first thought about are you a member of my tribe is what do we have in common, right? So at the very profound way, it could be our values, our goals at KPMG, and so forth. Getting more sort of, quote, surface, and the brain doesn't distinguish. It could be what football teams or what sports teams do we root for, what kind of clothes do we like to wear, the fact that we're all kind of casual business, as we're all sort of in the same tribe. Not only are we the same tribe in terms of businesses, but we're the tribe of business people who attend a conference. And that's just because of what we're wearing. And your brain is processing this all the time and going tick, 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 what do we have in common? So when you're trying to build some trust with somebody, articulate not your differences, not your outstanding brand. First, articulate what you have in common so they feel you're part of their support network. And then you can say what the distinct value is that you can bring if, say, you're with a client. So this tribe and trust is very, very important. And that's what the brain is asking. Every second and a half, it's scanning the room. The amygdala, our friend the amygdala, is scanning the room, scanning the environment, looking at the screen with the people that you're, Skyping, whatever, and saying, are you a member of my tribe? It's also obviously behind bias and things like that, because if you look like you're a different gender or a different race or a different economic background, we click into you're different. And that's why you've got to work so hard to to make sure that the brain is hearing you go commonality, 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 and get beneath that. In order to resolve the 1%, remember our presenting issue sitting there, it still needs to be resolved, right? You still need to do something about the spreadsheet, the client project. Somebody's got to unload the dishwasher. So the 1% is still sitting there. How do you get to that? And how you do that is you work the 80%, talk about commonality, use praise, which makes them feel valued, and also find out what they need of you and be clear about your needs and expectations of them. Every relationship is a mutual satisfaction of need. If I have a need, you can meet, you have a need, I can meet, we're going to have some sort of relationship, right? I mean, it may be just that you smile and nod, and it may be I give you some information that's useful later on. We've got a certain kind of relationship, right? Some are transactional, some are more ongoing, but every relationship is a mutual satisfaction of need. And we so rarely think of what we need of others. As a performance manager, an engagement manager, a colleague, all of those roles, you have needs of others for you to be most effective, right? And most fulfilled. They have needs of you. And if you can find that out and actually articulate that, then you are going to have a functional relationship. You are going to give them that relationship safety because they know they can meet your needs and expectations. They don't have to keep guessing. Same thing for you. So that's in that 80% is largely around needs, and we're going to be talking about that later. So if you want to reinforce the 80%, surface the 20%, and together you'll work to resolve the 1%. Just in terms of what that means in practice, very, very briefly, say you're trying to get somebody to do something differently. Either you're a performance manager, engagement manager, just you've got to work differently for a better result with a colleague, right? You might start with reinforcing the relationship, give them some praise, show that you really want, maybe say, you know, we're just starting working together, I would really like a great relationship with you. Or as your performance manager, I really care about your progress, and I'm committed to that, and I look forward to working with you on that. Or hey, it's great to see you at the conference. Just really enjoy catching up with you. Wasn't sure you'd be here. Anything like that, you solidify the relationship. Then that buys you the ability to start asking questions. So say that as a performance manager, you've got somebody who's missing deadlines, right? Or a colleague. You've got somebody who is just not doing what they need to do within the team because they're actually missing deadlines. You're not getting the work you need when you need it. And you decide to have a conversation. Okay, so you're going to build the relationship, right, with them in some way that you calm down the amygdala, really want to work with you well, loved the last work you did on the last project. But hey, I really want to make sure that you and I work as well as possible together, and I'm puzzled as to what's going on about these missed deadlines because they're making it difficult for me. Or I feel that it's going to impact on your performance, and I'm committed to helping you develop there. So that's the 80%. Now you're going to go into the 20% and say, talk to me about what's happening. You never missed deadlines before. And suddenly you're missing deadlines. What's going on? And you're showing actual curiosity, which I'll be talking about. You ask these open-ended questions. You don't say, can you stop? Or you don't say, why don't you, which backs them into a corner. You say, talk to me about what's going on. This actually isn't like you. And let's pretend it's not for a moment. But so what's going on? And they say, oh, you know, I have so much more work. I've been promoted, change, which is scary. And then you find out that actually they feel that they're not allowed to ask questions about priorities, or they feel they're not allowed to come to others for help because you've asked their hopes, their fears. They fear that if they ask questions, they're going to be thought less of. And they really want to please, as all humans do. And now you can work with them on what would you need of me in order to help you prioritize? What would you need of me in order to feel more comfortable coming to me for assistance when you get stuck? You see where I'm going here? Yeah? So you're reinforcing the relationship all the way through, surfacing the 20%. Together now, the missed deadlines, you can simply agree to some of the actions that come out of the conversation, and probably that will solve the problem. Okay? So does that make sense? I'd like you just to think for a moment and turn to your neighbor and talk about what about this resonates with me, and what might I or my team do differently as a result? Okay? So just turn to your neighbor and just each of you spend literally about 2 minutes saying what resonates with you about particularly this aspect of where the brain is, but also anything that's come up before. You guys all did it? Wow. Great. Okay, good. Excellent. Coming back together again. Who would like to share something that you shared or that your neighbor shared with you? We've got mics. Somebody's going to run up to you so you don't have to scream so much. Yeah? Come on. One person to share. Excellent. The gentleman over here is going to share. Thank you.
Thank you. So we were talking about at the start of an engagement and having a conversation up front by saying, finding common ground, first of all, that 80% part or 79%.
Beautiful.
So that you have the tribal aspect covered.
Yeah.
And then also have a very open conversation about what you're hoping, what they want and what they're hoping to achieve. What are their non-negotiables? Like if they're very sporty, do you have to take exercise every day? In which case, how can we build that into the work? And make sure that you support them in that.
That's brilliant, brilliant. What was one of the very, did you hear a lovely nuance of what he's saying? What's your name, by the way? Mark. Mark brought up a really great nuance. Did anybody hear this in the exchange of, in a sense, what I would call the exchange of needs? Support, yeah? Yeah, what else? What I really liked was, what are your non-negotiables? Do you see? All of us need to know what our non-negotiables are, and when we tell somebody our need, often that's the start of a negotiation. If you like, every relationship is a negotiation of needs. And knowing what your non-negotiables are, or where there's some negotiation, or where it's just a nice to have, is really important. Thank you for that. That's brilliant. Excellent. One more sort of what you might do differently. One more. I'm going to choose somebody. No? Nobody wants to share? Okay, excellent. Can you give her the mic?
Hello, Marion from Canberra. Something that you said that resonates with me is to, when you give feedback or when you counsel it, to really think about asking them what you need from me and not to say, this is what I think you should do. So really put them in the driver's seat, which resonates with what Susan said around asking for feedback and not just waiting to be told what to do.
Beautiful. So you're asking them, what do you need of me? And then you might even say, coming from that, if you were to extrapolate, what I need of you is to give me feedback about what in our relationship as your performance manager, what's working and not. Can you agree? That's one of the other things that they found out about feedback in research, by the way, that is that if you ask them for feedback, they're much more likely to ask you for feedback back. And by the way, feedback isn't always about doing something differently. You need to be looking for what they do very well, too, and building on that. So when they ask for feedback, they're not going to get hit with all the negatives at once, right? That there's some praise in there, too, so that you activate the reward system, and we'll be talking about that. That's really excellent. Very, very good. There are a few core skills I'd like to just briefly mention here, because as I say before, there's complicated behavioral neurogenetics underneath this, but what you do is fairly simple. And you have come up against all of these skills, I am sure, in some of your courses. If not, you are going to come up with them many times going forward. But what I would just like to do is give you maybe a little bit of slant from the world of behavioral neurogenetics about some of the things that we now know about why they're important or how to do them better. Very often we still, I do conferences around the world, I watch top executives speak, I watch government leaders speak together, and one of the things that I find is that the really great ones, the mediocre ones come in and they talk and talk and talk and talk, and the really great ones come in and say, what I'd like to know is. And they show curiosity about each other's and about each other's viewpoints. And that's authentic, one form of authentic power. And they kind of shift the conversation by where their genuine curiosity is. And they make people feel valued and empowered in terms of giving them their decisions or their thoughts. So very simple thumbnail tip from the world of behavioral neurogenetics: ask more than tell. When you go into a meeting, think, not so much what am I going to say, and this is true with clients as well, by the way. as if you want to be a good advisor, which I'm sure all of you are, you go in saying, not do I want to tell, but what am I curious about? And what questions might I ask? Very, very important. And then, of course, once you've asked, what do you have to do? Listen. It's so obvious. When I was working at the Mount Sinai Medical Center as a psychologist in New York, we had a training video for physicians. And I still love it. This was quite a while. I'm not going to say how long ago. It was a while ago, right? And they show the doctor with his stethoscope around, and he says, how are you feeling today? And the person starts to answer, and he puts his stethoscope in his ears. And I see that a lot when I watch consultants sometimes, and sometimes fall into it in myself. We actually stop ourselves, or our genetics, neurobiology throws up blocks to actually hearing what people say. We do not hear, in the sense of really meaningfully retaining, 60% of what people say. Talk about a dialogue of the deaf, right? It's just wow, but 60% of what they say. And the reason is either that we are so busy thinking of the clever riposte that we're going to make, right? We've kind of figured out what they're going to say, and we're already thinking about what we're going to say back. It's called reloading. How many of you do that? Under stress, right? Yeah, it's just awfully hard not to think of what am I going to be saying next. But you miss the person. You really miss the person. So don't reload. The other things that happen is that if you have a set idea, your assumptions are getting in the way. Your assumptions will make it hard to hear. I go into a meeting with one of my colleagues. He's much more positive than I am. The client says, that was a really, really interesting program you ran, right? Bob comes out and says, wow, they loved the program. I come out and I say, oh, they hated it. So we hear differently depending on our filter. So that's why it's good to be aware of your own assumptions. And it's good to help the people that you're supporting be aware of theirs, because they will filter everything through their assumptions. Yes, was that a question?
Yes, would you be able to rerun through the reward mechanism? Hi.
Go ahead.
Could you please go through the reward mechanism of the brain? I think I'm not clear on that.
I will, that's going to be number 3 praise, and I'm going to go, after I go through this slide. I paid her to Dorothy Dix the question. Thank you so very much. The check will come later. That was perfect. Yes, the reward center of the brain, the moment we're all waiting for, right? Wait for it, folks, it's coming. And it's about how to get people addicted to the relationship with you. Are you for that? Yeah? Yeah? Good. Excellent. So I'm kind of saving that bit for later. Just that 60% of what people say. The other thing that makes it so that we can't hear is when we are under stress, because the amygdala has just blocked everything off, and we just really can't hear. So, yes? How do we drive the conversation? Okay. So they ask, how do you think you're doing?
So if we don't, imagine we have a performance manager that has gone through this things the same way, how do we drive them towards us?
Okay, good. One of the things that you could say is, you could answer to the best of your ability, and you say, what I would really like, what I would need from this conversation is for us to talk about this. Is that okay with you? This giving needs, people hardly ever do it, but it's a great thing to come into a conversation and you're curious, but you also state, this is what I'd like to get out of it. What would you like to get out of it? This is what I need to get from the conversation. What would you need? So after you've praised them so that they're starting to become hooked on you, then you say, this is what I would like. Could you agree to do that? Okay? And they may say yes, they may say no, and if they say no, then you say, well, could we do that another time? I understand that this is a burning issue for you, and I really want to hear what you have to say. After all, you're my boss. But could we come back on this thing that I wanted to discuss later? Okay? And that's a very, very, very good question. Asking questions puts you in the driver's seat. And if they're in the driver's seat, you got to answer the questions, but you may have to put forward a need as to what you want to talk about or the questions that you have. Excellent. Really good. I love it that you're asking questions, by the way. Thank you. That's excellent. Praise, I'm going to talk about in terms of the brain's reward system in a minute. And just one other quick tip. When you use generalities and jargon, you push people away. Were you aware of that?
No.
How many, you see, particularly if you're trying to give feedback or something, you're just not a good team player. What the heck does that mean? I need you, you got to be more supportive. Huh? I've been noticing you're not really very proactive, are you? We've all got to be more agile. Oh, yeah, we all have to be more agile. Right? What the heck does it mean? Now, the team here has done a great job of saying what it means, but it means a range of things in different contexts, doesn't it? So, to put yourself in the driver's seat, to empower you functionally, don't let somebody give you a generality and then stop there. Because they will expect you to take action on it as if you've agreed to it, be a better team player, whatever it is, be more agile. And you'll wander away not knowing what they were talking about. I had a client the other day come in and said, my boss told me to be more negative. I said, wow, that's a first. Have they not been at the neuro conferences in the last decade? What should be more negative? Okay, besides the fact that the brain can't do it on command, do you know what he meant? She said, no. And now she's going to go back and actually ask what she would do if she were more negative, okay? Maybe she's not speaking her mind enough. Maybe they don't feel that she's being honest in her opinion. I have no idea, neither does she. Generalities reduce trust. Don't give them, don't accept them. They disempower everybody, okay? Are you ready for it? Here's the reward system. The reward system is sometimes called the dopaminic reward system because one of the major neurochemicals is dopamine. When you praise somebody, you release dopamine, and dopamine is one of the drivers of the reward system. But before I tell you the sneaky truth about dopamine and oxytocin, which I'll tell you if you're really interested, which is another neurochemical that drives the reward system, I gotta ask you, how many of you in the last 5 working days, not at the conference, in the last 5 working days, received praise at KPMG, not from the client, which is often our biggest source of dopamine, but at KPMG? Raise your hand. Excellent, raise your hand. Okay, not so bad. I'd say about, I don't know, slightly more than a third, less than half of the room. There's upside potential, guys. There really is. How many of you gave praise? By the way, praise is not thanks for that. Thanks for that is good manners. It's excellent. I am really all for it. But it is not praise. Praise is that you did something well or how you did it. How many of you actually gave praise? The whole room. I never understood this about organizations. Somehow more are always giving than receiving praise, which is really, really interesting for the math. But I think it's actually true. I just can't work out how that happens. Of those of you who gave praise, how many praised people who are junior to you? Great. How many praised colleagues? Wow. Almost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of 200 plus. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Interesting. How many of you praised upwards, somebody senior to you, like your boss? 1, 2, 3, 4. Interesting. One of the things about dopamine is that it increases short-term memory. So if you want your boss to remember who you are, it is not a bad idea to really lay on the praise. And very often, they get less of it than anybody else. Did you know that? And you may have found that too, that as those of you who are managers, as you got promoted, people stopped thinking that it was their job to give you praise. Did you notice that? Yeah. So the people who need to be most kind of energized because you have so many responsibilities in the relationship space are getting less dopamine. Very, very interesting. And dopamine is, you probably know it as the happiness neurochemical. But what we found lately is that it's not just happiness. In fact, that's a minor part. It is the neurochemical that really runs the brain. It runs short-term memory. It runs so many functions of the brain. You cannot be effective, much less happy. You cannot be effective without dopamine. One of the things that happens when you get in isolation is that the brain actually shuts down the dopamine, the parts that allow the brain to receive dopamine. And that's when you are literally preparing your brain and body to die. Because without dopamine, you just aren't motivated to do anything. And it can lead to depression and so forth. So we really need that dopamine. An interesting thing about dopamine is that it is an opiate. Have you heard that? Bet you didn't know that. Did you know that? Yeah. Everybody always says, do I have to praise people? Or a lot of people say, do I have to really praise people? Is there a pill? And there isn't a pill. But if there was a pill, it would be addictive. And those of you in the room who might work in risk wouldn't let us have it. So actually, so literally, when you become the source of somebody's praise, you're the one who's giving them praise. Praise is addictive. It's good addictive in that it doesn't get normalized. They don't need more and more of it. They just always need it. But it doesn't become less effective the more you give it, by the way. But when you give them praise, they become addicted to you. How cool is that? And if you're giving somebody an addictive substance, what does that make you?
The dealer.
Their dealer. Absolutely right. And I have very, very seldom found anybody who is truly nasty to their dealer. So, right? Yeah, right. More stress, the more we, never mind, I'm not even going to go there. But, you know, think about that. When you think about building on people's strengths, there are 3 types of praise that are effective, not only for the big things people achieve, the what, you know, they got the project in on time, the client loved it, but also how. Did they try something different? Did they do something differently, or did they put in extra effort? You should be the one praising them for that, whether it's a colleague or a team member, or certainly somebody you're developing, because as you praise them, they will do more and more. So the how is particularly good for performance development because they will do more of what you praise them for because they want the relationship with you, because they want you to be part of their support network, right? And besides, they're addicted. So the what, the how, and finally the who. What I call who praise is shorthand for a relationship statement. If there's nothing else you can say about somebody, that you can't think of something really nice to say about what they do or how they did it, you can just say, I would really like a great relationship with you going forward. You know? And again, I'm glad to see you at the conference will do. Could we go for a drink after work? These are all statements that say, I appreciate you, I value you. You're laughing. I have to be in on the joke. What were you saying? What were you laughing? No? Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on how safe the person feels with you in receiving that message, right? And appropriate. You know, and I'm not saying it's inappropriate. No, I'm not going into that kind of inappropriateness. But you can say that you love somebody in ways that they might find it more easy to receive. And it's really not love. I mean, love is one kind of a relationship, but what we have to have is these supportive relationships. So in a way of achieving this, what you're trying to achieve there and really galvanizing the reward system is to say anything about that you want a relationship with them going forward, even if you say, look, we're in a bad place right now, we don't agree, and I really want it to get better going forward. Okay? So that's the reward system. And it's when you give a relationship statement, you actually release oxytocin, which is the trust neurochemical. So, and that also drives the reward system. So when you want to activate the reward system, think about helping somebody feel valued and safe. And when they feel valued and they feel safe, we can do enormous things. We can innovate, we can change. We can do incredible things. We can withstand much more stress when we feel that the people have our back and we're supported. When we don't feel that, when the reward system isn't being triggered, when we feel that we might be isolated, then we can't withstand any stress because we are already so beyond our design specs. Okay, so just want to leave you with the 3 key takeaways again. The 3 key takeaways are: get people committed to the relationship with you. Get them addicted to the relationship with you. Whether it's a colleague or somebody whose job it is that you develop, or a client or your friend, if their neurochemistry is geared toward you being part of their support system, they will self-organize to do the things that you want them to do, and they will also become committed to your goals and KPMG's goals. It's very interesting. If you get somebody committed to you, they will become, by proxy, committed to the goals of the team and the goals of the organization. Okay? Focus on strengths, build on strengths, galvanize the reward system in that way, and make sure that others focus on your strengths as well. And finally, clearly communicate your needs and expectations. Okay, so in the 2 minutes I have before we go to questioning, I just want you to turn to your other neighbor and say something, give them some kind of praise. It can be who praise or how praise or what praise. Give them some kind of praise. And I must add another category which is trivial praise. You don't know each other well, right? And I don't care what the risk people to say. I think most women, it's okay to say your hair looks nice today, you know? You don't, you know, if you're going, ha, 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 your hair looks wow today, you know, okay, I think we can tell that one. But, you know, your hair looks nice today is probably okay. By the way, more praise, in my experience, more praise is there's one place that spontaneous praise happens more than any place else that was mentioned earlier in another context. But we all do it women tend to do it very spontaneously in the ladies' room. And we could all take it, right, well, that's a nice dress. Or, you know, right, we do, don't we? Ladies are nodding. Yeah, we have a kind of special place there, and you know we should spread that. Think about the culture of praise, the culture of the ladies' room. Men's room, I don't know, and I'm not going there. Okay, so turn to the person next to you and give them a piece of praise. Then it can be trivial. Okay, that's enough. It's enough of the dopamine. Enough of the dopamine. Cut the addiction. Okay, how did that feel? How did it feel? Good? 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 Okay, good, good, good. Anybody feel kind of, that was kind of weird? Yeah? Yeah, tell me, who felt it was weird? Yeah, it can feel weird sometimes, can't it? One of the things that took me about a decade to learn to receive praise, and as a psychologist I had to work at it. It's just, oddly enough, it's countercultural. In hunter-gatherer tribes, and I have visited some kind of some on that bandwidth, not the original ones, but they do it naturally all the time. We are meant to praise each other because it feels good when you get it as well as you receive. When you give it as well as you receive it, you also get that dopamine hit. So we're wired for it. But in our silly society, one of the many ways we've gone off track is that we've become stilted around receiving praise. So, you know, you can get there, but for some of you, it's going to be harder to ask your teammates to give it to you than it is to give it. And certainly, it may be a bit of practice at first to say thank you when they do. You know, instead of, oh, that was nothing, which was always my first default, which just insulted the person who was trying to say something nice and giving me their opinion, right? Yeah, I know. And the thank you. Thank you very much. You know, good, excellent. Any questions? We have a few minutes for questions. We've gone through quite a lot. Have we, the lady about the reward system, are you happy? Do you have more questions? Thank you. Wow, I met an expectation. Hit of dopamine, yes. Anybody else?
I just wanted to ask about replying back to someone with your understanding of their requirement or their need and how that affects in the brain, but also, slightly off topic, it's also smiling when you're conversing with someone.
Smiling is wonderful. Just to take the last first step, they did a study that I always find interesting. They found that if you smile when you're delivering bad news, the person takes it a lot better. Now, there are limits. You know, you're fired! Doesn't really cut it, you know, so don't, you know. But actually smile, particularly at the beginning of it, because when you smile with humans, not chimps, it's a threat, but with humans it actually says, I want to be here and I mean you no harm. Now sometimes women smile too much because we just, you know, in the old days particularly, we just didn't want to mean anybody too much harm when it was not the most powerful place to be. But I think we can do a lot of great smiling in the workplace, and there's still a lot of upside to come with smiling. And if you do have a hard message to give somebody, smile when you make the relationship statement, smile when you make the praise, smile at every point where it's in alignment with what you're saying. And that's very important, brilliant. And the other question is, how do you reflect back that you've heard somebody?
Yeah, repeating your understanding of their needs.
Excellent. Repeating, what I hear you say is you need this. I didn't have a chance to talk about what makes a good need, but a good need that somebody can do. If you want somebody to be able to do what you ask, it's got to be specific so they know what the heck you're talking about. It's got to be about an action or a thought because they can't have a thought or feeling on command. And it's got to be doable by a person in that situation, like that, their experience and so forth. And it needs to be in the workplace. It needs to be appropriate to the workplace. But just think about specific action. So if somebody is giving you a need, you say, do I know what they're asking me to do? Very simple. If you don't know what they're asking you to do, you could say, could you explain, or could you tell me how often you would like to meet, if your need is to meet, or you could say, what I hear you saying is that what you mean? So brilliant, very, very good question. Yeah, when somebody gives you a need, don't say yes unless you know absolutely what you're signing up to, because their job is then to monitor that, and their system will. And if you agree to do something and don't do it, that's when you break trust. So you need to be very clear on what you say yes to, and it is okay to say no, and it is okay to negotiate. Of course, it might end the relationship, but sometimes that's worth it, to be honest and for your own integrity, particularly when there's a need that is really important to you, that is non-negotiable. And we need our non-negotiable needs. We need our backbone of those. That's very, very important. You don't always give them, but you at least need to know what they are. Okay? Time? Or would you have time for one more?
Quick one.
Quick one.
I just have a question around giving not necessarily a positive feedback, but more if the person thinks very highly about their work and about what they did, but in actual fact, what you think it is the total opposite. How do you actually deal with giving that feedback without isolating the person and making the person not want to work with you anymore?
Yeah. No, that's a really important one. First of all, start any difficult conversation with a piece of praise, what, how, or who, even if it's a relationship statement. You know, I really enjoy working with you. You do so much that's good. You're so committed to your work, and that makes it delightful to work with you. There are some things that I think would make you more effective and would help me as your performance manager or colleague or whatever. Would you agree to talk about them? Okay, so that's where they get that buy-in. So if they haven't asked you and you say, would you agree to talk about them, then in a sense you're at least getting their buy-in so they can hear it better. Then come to really clear agreed actions. You can say, this is not I need you to get the work to me on time, and when you agree to do it, could you agree to that going forward? Do not get into an argument about what they didn't do in the past. You'll just get into that 1%. So you want to say very briefly what you would need of them to rectify in service of a better relationship with you and therefore perhaps more success at KPMG. Do you see what I mean? So forward-looking feedback, come to clear actions, an agreement about clear actions, and praise them all the way through if you can, but particularly in the beginning so their brain says, he comes in peace. Okay? Good.
I might just add something to that. If we move from where we are right now, if we move from where we are right now in terms of our feedback culture to a feedback culture where everyone is always asking for feedback, we might not ever have those sorts of situations because we'll be much more real time saying to each other, how do you think I'm going? So you're then going to have an opportunity to step in and say, this was great, but on this piece next time, could you do this, this, and this, rather than that, and that? And we'll just be in much more of a rhythm about these sorts of things, because I think at the moment what happens is we store up all this constructive feedback to then hand over in a big momentous meeting, and it is just a very difficult, high-risk situation. So one of the things that we really want to think about as we go forward is how we can move to a rhythm where everyone is asking for feedback all the time, and then it can feel so much lower stress. Yeah. But for the moment, while we're still in this moment where we do that sort of sit down, serve up, something like that, I think we have to have the sorts of tools that Alicia just talked about. Yeah. The other piece of interesting research that's been released in the last year is with a hospital, I think in Wisconsin in the States, where they've got this rule, everybody in the hospital, if you are 10 feet away from someone, you have to look at them in the eyes, and as soon as you get to 5 feet, you have to smile at them. And they've done this, and what that has shown is that their sort of patient fatality rates have just dropped through the roof because everybody is so much more alive and alert to understand, to picking up signals about how everything is going in the hospital. It's been it's a fantastic piece of research. So the smile thing, I think, really works. Any other questions on this or anything else that you've heard in the last hour or so? Good. Okay. Oh, yeah, it's one. Rob?
How would you recommend
working with people who do find it difficult to accept praise. Alicia, I know you said took a decade. So clearly there's something that needs to get broken. And sometimes I think we all work with people who kind of just can't seem to break through that barrier that people will accept that praise, which is so key for their confidence. Could you give us any tips for breaking through?
Yeah, I once had somebody in China, a top leader in China, said he couldn't praise his secretary because she'd faint, and it was a risky situation because she'd never heard it before. I think there's two answers to that. One is that, in a sense, it's like what Susan just said. You create a culture of praise. You demonstrate it. If everybody who can do it is doing it to the best of their ability, that will help break down the assumption that there's something wrong with giving praise. You will still find some people whose upbringing or previous work experiences have been so negative around praise, they just never got it. It'll still be difficult. And you can actually talk to people about that. You know, I notice you look a bit uncomfortable when I praise you. Is there a way that I could praise you that would be comfortable? Like in China, we got around to it. China's a very non-praising. In China, we got around to it that the one thing you're allowed to praise is food preparation. So everybody said, you know, what did you make for dinner last night? Wow, that sounds fantastic. And they broke it down little bit by bit. When you want people to change, first ask them what they could do differently or what you could do differently, and try to break it down little by little, because we don't change big things right away, but we can kind of get used to things little by little. So that's what I find them to say. One place that it's okay to say something nice, and how you might say that something nice, and then, boy, do that a lot. Good. And then you can take the Mickey out of it too. Sometimes people, you know, sometimes a culture of praise. One place that we, my colleagues and I taught praise, the top leader who was very uncomfortable with praise, we had somebody praise him in the workshop because he did this exercise, and they praised him for his tie. And he got up and he gave this talk about how it felt good, but it was hard to take. And so for the next 5 years, literally, when anybody saw Paul, they said, "Oh, Paul, great tie," you know, and it kind of wore him down.
And it might be interesting for you to know that when the NEC goes away together as a team, at least twice a year for 2 days, and all we talk about in those 2 days is how we're working together as a team and how effective we're going. We hardly ever talk about the business or the numbers. And one of the things that we do at the end of those 2 days is we do a circle, and each of us has to thank another person in the team about something that we've observed either over those 2 days or in the work that we're doing together as a team, because we're picking up this thing and needing to, in terms of understanding that in order for the NEC to be a really effective team and to have strong relationships and to be really mutually, collectively supportive, we have to have a culture of praise within the NEC. So that's something that you might want to think about doing that at the end of a team meeting. You just sit in a circle and then call out people around the circle and say, this is, you know, I really like that observation that you made, or you've been really honest and authentic. I learnt a lot listening to you. You can try some stuff out like that.